Not photogenic anyway. My sincere greetings to everyone, and with this greeting, we'll start this gathering. And we will start with the positive, constructive motivation. A constructive, positive and constructive motivation from our heart, according to our mental strength, capability, not in a form of potential or mimicking. As I've been keep saying, all of us have great potential to hold many layers of positive and constructive minds. In that regards, there's no doubt. Only thing that we need to do, we need to enhance those positive and constructive minds, such as very deliberately, very consciously making a decision in the morning, deliberately, intentionally, with a choice, not going to harm others' bodies, others' minds, emotions, and others' possessions and environments. And try to live during the day with that intention. And also during the day, every now and then, briefly to remind that morning motivation that we have set. Also, many of us able to think, able to, set the motivation, not only deliberately, intentionally, and choice, not going to harm others. If possibility arise, if chances occur, would like to support others, whoever that others can be close family members or completely strangers. And these are some of the basic, the positive and constructive motivation that we can set, regardless of different culture backgrounds, different beliefs background, or not having any beliefs. We all can set that kind of motivation. And we all can at least try to live with that motivation. Then of course, people who have a particular spiritual path to follow, like some of us follow the teachings of the Buddha, then set our motivation, intention, how we're going to live our lives in general and in particularly today. Set motivation according to some of the most, some of the principal teachings, like people who follow the teachings of the Buddha, going for refuge, seeing, understanding the qualities of the Buddha, the historical Buddha, particularly his mental qualities. We can understand his mental qualities through reading, listening, contemplating, and applying the teachings that he had given, such as the Four Noble Truths, for foundation of the mindfulness, and so forth. From there, we can get a glimpse of the historical Buddhas, his great qualities. And also taking refuge in Dharma. Dharma here refers to the teachings. Teachings at the two layers. The first layer is the verbal teachings, written teachings, and the important part of the teachings that we take refuge are the realizations out of those verbal teachings when we apply in our daily lives. Then the cultivation, the experience, the realization of ethics, wisdom, concentration, and the wisdoms. purifying, enhancing, having these technically called 3 trainings is the actual refuge. And taking refuge in Sangha as a spiritual friends, supporters. Doesn't need to be ordained monks or nuns. Doesn't need to be a Buddhist. Whoever lives according to close to the teachings of the Buddha, not harming any living beings, and supporting, helping, working well-beings of many, many living beings without any particular selections, without any exclusions. I'm sure there are many human beings right here and now, not necessarily saying I'm Buddhist, not necessarily studying, reading, joining classes of the Buddhist or going to the Buddhist temple, but live their life very close to the teachings of the Buddha. They are also the Sangha members from whom we can learn some of those great qualities, mental qualities, and those great actions, activities to support others. So mind taking refuge in 3 jewels for the people who follow the teachings of the Buddha is extremely helpful to hold in the morning, during the day, the afternoon, in the evening, whenever you can, briefly to remind yourselves as a follower of the Buddha, these are my refuge. And setting motivation in the morning, very, very useful. Then some of us follow among the teachings of the Buddha, Bodhisattva and the teachings. Some of us may follow the Vajrayana teachings. Then holding the altruistic awakened mind, bodhicitta, will be extremely helpful to hold in the morning as a motivation. In a broad sense, very genuinely, sincerely, from our heart, caring, concerning well-beings of all living beings. And during the day, as much as we can, try to structure our lives, actions of the body, speech and mind, close to that motivation. So in brief, it is useful, helpful, train and familiarize, setting the right positive motivation in the morning and during the day, every now and then, to remind ourselves that motivation was set. With that, I will say the refuge and the bodhicitta lines, and people who like to follow do so. Sanje chedan tsoje chananda chanjo pato dane jaso che dage chenso jebe tsonamaji jola penje sanje jobarasho Sanje chedan tsoji chanamala chanjo parto dane jaso che dage chenso jibe tsonamaji tola penje sanje tobarasho Sanje chedan tsoji chanamla chanjo pardo dane jaso che dage jenso jibe tsonamaji dola penje sanje doparasho Some of you who are not necessarily following the teachings of the Buddha, or who are not really familiar with this kind of recitations and the culture, you may think why Buddhists are so obsessed with the three lists. Recitation, they recite 3 times. And the refuge, they have 3 refuge jewels. And even the poisons, they have 3 poisons. Why they are very obsessed with it, 3, in the list of 3. So now here, why saying these 4 lines 3 times. The main reason is, saying those lines either verbally or mentally. As I mentioned the other day, many of these recitations, these written texts, scriptures, are like a meditation manual. Like for example, these days when you drive car, and particularly you are driving in a long distance that you don't know where the turns are, where the national highways are, when to exit, so you switch on or have the what's called GPS. So that then most of the time they say lady's voice to say such as coming. So then that means get ready, slow down and get ready to give the signal, either right or left, then turn. So that gives you the preparation, isn't it? It is not recitation, not to repeat after the voice. It is for the driver to give the instruction. And it is many of these recitations are in that manner. For the people who say it, to help the mind to set according to the recitation. It is not just pure saying it. Or saying it also have some benefits, but mainly many of these texts are meditation manual as the GPS voice. So why there are three times, in this case the 4 lines, I usually teach some of my friends, that if you are lucky, one first time recitation, you can get what you need to get. 3, taking refuge. In this case, first 2 lines are taking refuge, last 2 lines are holding the altruistic awakened mind. If you are lucky, saying those, either verbally or mentally going through, able to do that. If you missed mentally able to hold those 2 positive mental states at the first chanting or saying, there's a chance in the second time. But if you miss the second time, there's another chance at the third time. But if you miss the third time, then I say it's bad luck. So that is the main reason, is really repeating these, what you call some of these recitations are very much to familiarize our mind with the topics, what the lines are, saying. For example, sometimes we have this reciting 100,000 times. It is not the number, it is really to saying that for day after day after day after day. Hopefully there is some impact to the mind. It is not just a number. Though, I know I myself have done, number is very important to complete. For example, some of people who are relatively new in this kind of culture, I'm sure you have visited in the main temple. There are mainly these Tibetans, but there are some crazy Westerners too, making these so-called prostrations. I did this, I think 2007. Coming here, taking 6 months off from the center's work and coming here doing the prostrations. Those days, relatively easy to get in. There's no security check. There is a gate and a gatekeeper. If you give you 100 bakshis, he will let you go in by 3:30 in the morning if you are strong enough. So relatively easy compared to these days. These days very tough going through all this security check and so forth. Anyway, so the number in this case, saying 4 lines 3 times, is simply to make sure to hold the meaning of the lines. Yeah? So, while we have these 3 jewels, as I briefly touched other day, among the world religious traditions, major world religious traditions, Buddhism is one of small numbers of religious traditions do not assert such as creator. In Tibetan it's called Jigten Chevapo, creator of the universe. Not just the external, but also internal, the content, living beings. These all are through the multi-layers of causes and conditions come together, and they come into being, and to a certain extent they will dissipate. So under that situation, then because the human beings, I don't know the early human beings whether they have this kind of what we have, complicated, sophisticated, the mental structure. I don't know, but the last a few thousand years, we humans are more, have a sophisticated, complicated, a thinking mind. And to do that, to fulfill that, to at least to ease, particularly some of our needs and some of our worries, that which are not be fulfilled, or we don't get answers, from the external, what you call the things and events. Then we need to seek somewhere a little bit more powerful than our fellow human beings, or like early time praying to the sun, or powerful mountains, and so on and so forth. So here the Buddha, the historical Buddha, at his time, it seems, although I'm not good at the histories and all these things, but it seems during his time in India, there were many, many men, seems, seeking some form of answer to, some of the deeper layers of our difficulties, challenges on the one hand, or some of the profound yearning, longing that we have, and to seek answers. And the Buddha, historical Buddha, was one of those great beings, really sincerely, genuinely seeking. And he formed this, what you call the tradition, or this, tradition, or the spiritual path. And then later, his followers have developed these kind of mechanism to help their minds, see the Buddha as a teacher, mentor, not as a, sometimes the term is used, savior, and so on and so forth, but not as a savior like those Abrahamic religious traditions. Prayer, 100% trust, and 100% have a faith to the Creator, then leave it on him or her, I don't know, then he will sort it out. But not in that form, not in that manner, the teachings of the Buddha. It is more like the Buddha will show you, teach you, taught you the path. That is teaching become very much the main refuge. Out of 3 refuges, the first one is to just simply teacher, or mentor, or guide. As simple as that, not any further, no matter how much qualities, no matter how much compassion, wisdom that he has, but his role is teacher, as I quote yesterday. It says, "Ngani chola tarve lam dungi, tarva rangla rale shenjimin." I quoted the other day. I will say that this is coming from the Dhammapada. I will show you the path to experience liberation. Whether you're going to experience liberation or not, it is entirely upon you. In that sense, his role is just teach. The main refuge is what you call the second one out of three, Dharma, is teaching. And the teachings here refers to, as I just mentioned briefly, while we are setting the motivation, teaching refers to two kinds, or two levels. Teachings that Buddha gave, the historical Buddha gave, after his enlightenment, some 40-something years, to his followers, verbally, and sometimes physically. For example, the last teachings that he had given to his followers to understand nature of the life. In that place called Kushinagara, where the Buddha passed away, he was seriously ill. In terms of the age, 81, and not having luxury cars or like that to travel, but to travel all those years, mainly on foot, with the heat, with all things. And most of the times having just one meal a day. Imagine how his body may look like. Age 81 might be very frail. So when he got ill, seriously ill, and some of his, what you call Ananda, and some of his close disciples came to see him, and they requested him not to pass away. Stay with us. And they insist. Then he take away his robe, and he asked them, look at this body. Then of course it might be very, very frail, 81 age, or old, body. So that is what some teachers call, that is one of the last teachings to show the nature of life. So like that, the historical Buddha's role is very much to show the path, not show the miracles, very much to show the path. And in that case, Buddhists, follow of his teachings, see him, sort of relate him as a teacher. So the main is the Dharma. So verbal teachings, Dharma here, verbal teachings that he had given, and later on written down, maybe 100-something years ago, his followers put together. And most of the Buddhist scriptures attributed to the Buddha always start with, thus I have heard. That indicates what is written down as a sutra attributed to the Buddha is not really written down by Buddha himself. It is written down later, some of his direct followers, what they have heard But that remember, then written down. Not in the first council, second, I think around the third council, maybe 100-something years after Buddha passed away. So those verbal teachings and written teachings are the first layer of teachings. But the main teachings here refers to, out of those verbal teachings and written teachings, when we apply those to our mental continuum, when we experience ethics, start to construct the ethical life, start to experience inner concentration, and have a wisdom, those are the real refuge. Once we cultivate ethical life, that protects us from the wrongdoing, from the non-virtuous action. And that is refuge. Real, actual refuge is the Dharma. And when these three trainings are enhanced in the, what's called fully and completely, then as other day we were talking about what is genuine happiness. Do you remember? Oh, that is here. Cessation. The result of the cessation of suffering and origins of suffering. When that is experienced, and that is the true refuge. That's experiencing, actualizing that cessation. Buddha, in the Four Noble Truths, in the end of that sutra, Buddha said, "This is my last birth. There's no any further births, rebirths." What he's saying is, doesn't need to take any, not going to take any rebirth out of the what's called the delusion and the negative action, karma. So like that, it is very actual refuge is the second. And the third, Sangha. So now if you look at in this, I'm dealing with the three numbers, sorry, they've gone too long. But number, the actual refuge is the three jewels, the Dhamma. But to get the Dhamma, the Buddha to teach, in that sense, Buddha is one of the refuge objects. And the Sangha, who are, really, as I mentioned in the motivation, really trying to live their lives according to the teachings of the Buddha, that as a refuge, simply to learn from them how they're struggling, same as we struggle when we cultivate concentration, when we live ethical life. Learning from others is very, very useful. Then that's why the three jewels, why the number comes and so forth. So my main point is, don't think Buddhists are too obsessed with the, three things. Okay, so that is just general blah blah, which came into my head while I'm saying 3 times the refuge. Okay, I want to say something with this number. Oh yeah. Before I say a little bit further on the main topic, the nature of the mind, particularly with the, keep asking the questions, what's associated with that, with the Buddha nature, which I'm going to deal with this a little bit later. First, have a brief summary of particularly some of those, the general blah blah I've said at the beginning of the day. And these are something I usually feel, when we join teachings from those great teachers. I found those are very, very helpful in general. So it is very, very useful, helpful, not to take for granted this human existence. As in the Buddhist term, this human existence use the term precious human lives. So it is useful to remind ourselves all the time. Based on this mind and body, human existence, I can do something amazing things for myself and for others. Even if I don't believe next life, but in this lifetime, just in this lifetime, based on this human mind and body, I can do amazing things. Amazing things in the sense more than some of our daily needs. Food, shelter, clothing, medicines, and friendships. We humans need these. We need good friendship, company, good, we need clothing, we need shelter, we need medicine, we need food. And as I mentioned the other day, those necessities, we can collect, accumulate in a more exaggeration form, or other term is used, extreme form, where or we can collect them or accumulate them in the middle way, not extreme. And that is really very much our own choice. Our own choice. But we need those things. But just if we all our body energy, mental capabilities, time, resources, our education, and our company, friendship, all these, if we spend just to accumulate these things, then we are not using this human existence in its full capacity, in its full strength. That is something quite helpful to think about. Some Buddhist teachers use very dramatic analogies to understand that, to wake us up. One of the analogies is this, also related to our following up, the topics. A person, or a person who leads the family, wife, and two, three children, but facing shortage of food, clothing, all those things, let alone luxuries. But under the family's house, on the ground of the family house, there's a huge lump of gold. Huge lump of gold, but that is hidden. So the family, doesn't know that. And, but they struggle. All their survival, working hard. So it said, some teachers use this. If we use this human existence just simply to fulfill some of these what are listed, just for that, not further than that, then no matter what we have got, we are still living in a certain extent, in a poverty life. And that's what one of the the analogies. Another analogy is used, have a broom, yeah. These days people don't use that much broom in the West. Maybe here you can see every now and then. So to clean the house or the garden. The broom is made of gold, precious gold. But it is simply used to clean the dirty, house or the parts. Not very much useful. So there are many other dramatic analogies are used. So think about, what can art do further than, making, the food, shelter, medicine, clothing, the friendship. In certain extents, even certain type of animals can do much better than we human beings. There's a particular beautiful bird, a particular bird, I think mainly in Australia or New Zealand. The male bird, in order to attract the female, how that bird creates the nests, just amazing. Collecting all twigs and colorful things and how they arrange, really amazingly. In their body capacity, that's just amazing. And I watched there's one small, creature lives in the depth of the ocean. And again, similar, to attract the opposite sex. Really create a beautiful sort of what you call the pattern on the sand. Not small, really big ones. Through these small, what you call the wings or whatever you call it. And also a little bit taking fruit in mouth and then throwing like this. So we are not, greater than the others in terms of brain size. It is said that our brain is one of the largest brain, and so forth. So those are the things sometimes if we need to compare the living beings around us, and then how much that we are really utilizing this existence that we have. So very, very useful, not to, if I use this very, the strong words, not to waste the existence that we have. But same time, I'm not saying panic. Panicking is not helpful. When I say don't waste, don't panic. But have a very structured, I'm going to use this. Not just to benefit to myself, it is important, but also something to benefit to others. We have the ability to do. I want to give you one beautiful example. While I was living in UK, there was a nice program. I don't know how many series. There's one which I found very touching. It is just ordinary people doing ordinary things, but amazingly helpful for the others. There's one program that's from UK Channel 4. There's one program they said, camera people go and interviewed in Scotland, in Glasgow, one of the most deprived area. And the elderly guy, who is just working, to collect the dustbins. That's his job with a group of people. Just collecting the dustbins. Morning, usually in the morning, in the UK, early morning, sometimes it's very bothering, but it's good. So when, this guy, relatively elderly, maybe in his 50s, so when he goes around to collect the dustbin every day, and whenever he come across, in the bin or next to the bin, throw a broken bicycle. He takes that back to his home. He doesn't have that big home, but have a shade in his small garden. Then he repairs, takes those pieces from one part of the broken to put, and then he takes, gives to the local boys or the girls, children, free, without any charge. Dustbin collector, nothing unique or nothing special, but a very, very helpful work. And helpful to the local children. And local children, majority, are very, very poor family. So like that, we can do, when we say to help, to support others, don't think some kind of huge numbers, of living beings that you are going to give. Something amazing. Not some, look at the local, your neighbors, your communities. Something that we can do without any self-interest, without any thinking about return something. And that is what here is important for us. When I say, when I say, utilize this human existence more than just to gather, to accumulate those things, I'm not saying to become a world, leader. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that some kind of savior. What I'm saying and what I'm feeling is something that what we can do for others in a very simple form. in the Buddhist training, that altruistic awakened mind, although its full scope is all living beings. As I said many times, all living beings. Nobody is excluded. Everyone is included. That is the thing. But in reality, to do the work, then it is, one-to-one, small group. It is impossible to say all living beings. How are you going to get in the depth of the ocean? Impossible. But then point is training the mind in that fashion, then to get it whenever and whoever comes that in front of you to serve, then you are ready. You don't think second time, oh, is he going to give me something back? Or is he Tibetan? Or is he my colleagues or my families? Those thoughts shouldn't occur by the training. And that is the meaning of all, when we train, say all living beings. That will come. So the very, very useful. So we had, talked those things. Also, another important point I'm going to raise again, some of you may feel annoying, is the understanding of nature of impermanence. Very, very, important reality to be realized, to be understood. As if you remember, I used that sutra in maybe the first day. Buddha said, among the many different footprints, the elephant footprint is most impressive. Likewise, among the many mindfulness that you can practice, the mindfulness of nature of impermanence is the most powerful mindfulness. That may, particularly that nature, the nature of impermanence, when we start to apply to our own lives, our close families, our possessions, and so forth, initially may bring some uncomfortable. That is due to the attachment, due to the clinging mind that we have. We want to cling on. Though in reality, those what we cling on, they are slipping, from our hands all the time, but still we want to cling on. And that uncomfortable feeling of uncomfortable when we reflect on nature of impermanence related to our lives is the uncomfortable feeling of uncomfortable is simply due to the craving, the clinging. But gradually, this will subside. Then that, contemplation will be extremely helpful in the sense to appreciate every moment of our life, every hours, every day of our lives. We feel deep, deep appreciation. Lucky. Feeling of lucky. I'm still alive. Usually we just carry on. You know, if you, some of you, I'm sure you have read those things. You know, people who have serious life-threatening illness, and due to the treatments or whatever, when they recover, ask them their attitude towards their life, before and after. Majority will say that changed their attitude towards their life. Before, get that kind of serious illness, life-threatening illness, difficult to appreciate. But after, there's deep sense of appreciation. Every day. Deep sense of appreciation to their close family members and so forth. And that is here, you know, for us to really to feel. Otherwise, you know, these days there are lots of, you know, unpleasant chatterings collectively and also sometimes individually, you know, and not very helpful. So the contemplating the nature of impermanence, particularly related to one's own life, is very, very useful, helpful. So I have shared this before and I repeated those 2 points. Mm-hmm. And third point is, you know, over the last 6 days, you know, one of the main theme is we are capable. Our minds are capable. Capable in the sense to change, to transform. From the something that we would like to have, like a love, compassion, altruism, understanding, deeper nature of reality. Our minds are capable. Sometimes when we do the meditation, you know, once we hear that, listen that, discuss with the people, you know, the cultivation of like a mindfulness, cultivation of compassion, cultivation of wisdom is very, very useful, helpful to ourselves, to others. When hear that, we then try, cultivation, to cultivate mindfulness. Maybe, you know, in a regular basis, for a few months. And then we may feel, oh, this is not my cup of tea. Or this is not working for me. When that kind of thought occurs, then to remember, you know, your mind is still, you know, capable to transform. It's not static. Basically, our minds and those great teachers, like in Buddhist circle, like the Buddha and subsequent those great Buddhist teachers' minds, past and the present, fundamental level is same. No difference at the basic level. We all have the same sets of, you know, these kind of thoughts, emotions, and so on and so forth. So, you know, the other day I briefly talked about 3 kinds of laziness. Do you remember? Have you written down those in the notebooks? Very, very helpful. particularly one which I want to briefly to remind all of us. In Tibetan it says, Chawa Neshinji Lelo. Chawa Neshinji Lelo. I usually use this term. Keeping ourselves extremely busy, physically, as well as mentally. But that busyness, that keeping ourselves very busy, busy, but that keeping business very busy, not producing any meaningful results. In other words, simply distracting our minds from the important points. Simply keeping busy. That is particularly our modern 21st century's illness. Nowadays, since I think these gadgets comes, we have a more sort of things to look at. Keep ourselves very busy. When I first joined in London, gone to London and going with the underground, in the UK they call underground metal, particularly in the morning. If you travel those days, early 1990s, most of the people, I usually say, the teaching to British people, most of the people in the underground, in the morning is very much packed, because in the rush hour, majority of them, I say, covering their face with the newspaper. Don't know what they're reading. Really, if you have say 20 people staying in one compartment, 19 definitely they are just covering their face with the newspaper. These days, same percentage, but they are with the finger flipping. That I noticed my recent visit. Sometimes, once I look around, I travel between South Kensington to one of those busy, somewhere in Oxford, not directly. So one time in the compartment, I was sitting, except me, all with like that, flipping. So we keep ourselves extremely busy in these activities, not very much new things, important, useful things to learn. And that is, as I mentioned in the other day, according to those great Buddhist teachers, type of laziness. Though very busy, physically, mentally, but not very productive. So think about those things. So I'm going to go back to one step further before the previous points. So I said, basically, us, right here and now, and those great teachers, not only in the Buddhist circle, there are many different communities, many different societies. There were many good human beings, very knowledgeable, very brave, very active, very, forthcoming to support. We all have the same, what you call the potential to do the same thing. And in this case, Bodhisattva in the teachings, or sometimes called Mahayana teachings, there's a particular topic that the other day the people raised questions. Is there any connection between the fundamental nature of the mind, luminosity, and the Buddha nature? So this term, Buddha nature. In Tibetan it is called Sanje Ji Rik. Sanje Ji Rik. Sanje here Buddha. Rik, in this case translated nature, but the Rik has many different connotations. Rik means type, kind, which is not very nice culture, like in India have this culture of, the different, what you call the class or not class, different castes. Kota, that's called. So setting. So in this case, Buddha nature, in terms of the sutra references, there are a few here and there in the Theravadan texts. Theravadan texts in the sense common texts, sutras, common to the the Theravadan tradition as well as the Mahayana traditions, but not that many obvious references in the common in the Theravadan sutras. But in Mahayana sutras, particularly in the tradition, that Tibetan Buddhist tradition, which comes from Sanskrit Indo-Buddhist traditions, the entire teachings which are attributed to the historical Buddha is divided into three groups. Sometimes term is used, the first will of the turning wheel of the Dharma, and the second turning wheel of the Dharma, and third turning wheel of the Dharma. So in the Sanskrit Buddhist tradition, which then now in Tibetan Buddhist tradition, Kolo Tangbo, Kolo Niba, Choji Kolo Tangbo, Choji Kolo Niba, Choji Kolo Sumba Tama. So there are groups of sutras, belongs to the first turning of the wheel of the Dharma. And these group of the sutras are the common to the Theravadan Buddhist practitioner as well as Mahayana Buddhist practitioners. Then there is a group of sutras, attributed teachings, scriptures, attributed to the historical Buddha, belongs to the second turning of the wheel of the Dharma. And these are, we can, discuss some of the topics in terms of the sutra. These are so-called Mahayana sutras. Mahayana sutras, such as some of you may have heard, very well-known Heart Sutras, Heart Sutra. chanted in Japanese, chanted in Korean, in Chinese, and many different languages. Beautiful, short sutra called Heart Sutra, or overall that group of sutras is called in Sanskrit Panchaparamita Sutras, or in English sometimes translated Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. That is the second turning of the wheel of the Dharma. Now then, a group of the teachings called third turning of the wheel of the Dharma. That is also that group of sutras are the Mahayana Sutras, and in Tibetan it says Gautama Lekje Chobo. Gautama means the last turning of the wheel of the Dharma. Lekje Chobo, lekpa number cheba. Literally it means making clarification. What is said in the second turning of the wheel of the Dharma and first turning of the wheel of the Dharma. Group of, in this case, not necessarily, the human disciples. Some of the what in the Mahayana tradition called bodhisattvas, like Manjushri, like Avalokiteshvaras, like Maitreyas. Group of bodhisattvas asked the Buddha, at certain occasion, most of the time in the first turning of the wheel of the Dharma, you said this. And in the second turning of the wheel of the Dharma, you said this. It seems there are contradictions. There are contradictions. What you said in certain groups of sutra and what you said in the other groups of sutra. But we believe you don't have any contradictions because you are fully awakened. Tell us why you said this in this occasion to this group of people and why you said this. And in this last set of sutras is called the last or the third turning of the wheel of the Dharma. So there are locations are identified. For example, first turning of the wheel of the Dharma is in Sarnath, near Varanasi. And there are other locations, but they are very specifically identified. Second turning of the wheel of the Dharma, location is identified at Vulture's Peak, not very far from here. On the way to the Rajgir, those days that place seems to be very, very rich, very, very prosperous town or the whatever kingdom called Rajgir. I think hour and a half by car, and there's a mountain, a range of mountain. One peak is identified as a way Buddha taught that group of the sutra. Not necessarily all, I don't know, but that's how it is. And then Yangbachen, I think did you say something? Vishalis is the third turning of the wheel of the Dharma, Yangbachen in Tibetan, which is further than Patna. From Patna you have to travel maybe 45 minutes by car, then you find a place called Vishali. And that place is identified as a Buddha taught the third turning of the wheel of the Dharma. But this is very much, this explanation what I have given, is very much in the Mahayana traditions. Theravadan traditions won't say that. Theravadan traditions won't recognize the sutras in these last two turning of the wheel of the Dharma. second and the third turning of the wheel of the Dharma, Theravadan tradition masters won't recognize as a historical Buddha's teachings. But we will not go there. No? That's our. Now the point what I'm making is the group of sutra belongs to the third turning of the wheel of the Dharma, and then these sutras, they raise very often the term Buddha nature. Buddha nature. And based on those sutras, some of the Indian masters have written commentaries, including, I quote once or twice. There's a particular text which is called Sublime Continuum. Sublime Continuum. My Sanskrit, those terms, names are really completely rusted because I don't use that much these days, last 6 years, 7 years. In Tibetan is Gyulama. Sorry? Oh yeah, that's right. Uttara something. Can you say it again, please? Yeah, anyway. I can't. It is Sanskrit, it is difficult to catch. Thank you. So in English, it is translated saying Sublime Continuum. In Tibetan, it's called Gyulama. It has 4 chapters. It has 4 chapters, and it deals with these 4 chapters deals with 5 or 6 important topics. They all are related to this subject, Buddha nature. Buddha nature. So basically, the main, the main sort of point in here is each, not just human beings, each and every living beings, have a seed or have a potential. That there are many different terms, seed or potential or the nature to become Buddha. Not the Buddha, but to become Buddha. I mean, of course, we won't become the Buddha. That's an individual, isn't it? I don't know whether you want to become the Buddha because he's an Indian guy. So anyway, here is to become Buddha. To become Buddha. So we all have the seed or the potential or the nature to become Buddha. To become Buddha, it means to become fully awakened beings. Fully awakened beings. That is the understanding of Buddha. It has several different connotations, opening and increasing this term in Sanskrit, Buddha, the opening the butt, increasing all those. But in this case, particularly the topic that we are talking about is awakening Buddha. So the term that in the Buddhist teachings, fully awakening. Of course, we all are awakened, are we? We are not in the bed or sleeping. But here, fully awakening refers to. Do you remember yesterday? Some of us used this term from the 3 poisons. Awakening, fully awakening from the 3 poisons: attachment, hatred, and ignorance. Once our individual's mental continuum, your minds, my minds, individual's mental state or mental continuum is free, completely free from those three poisons, we can say I'm fully awakened beings. Because my mind is fully awakened. The individuals to become fully awakened beings or not, it is 100% dependent on his or her mental states, minds, or mental continuum is fully awakened or not. And meaning of fully awakened is completely free from three poisons. Not only the manifested three poisons, but even from the seeds, from the propensities. Do you remember, some of you may have small gardens, vegetable gardens, and when I was a young boy, as I mentioned the other day, my parents grow the basic needs of the vegetables in the family background, back garden, and the onion, garlic. These plants, even if we pull out the plants or the vegetables, still for a few days they will keep the smells at the ground. Smells. That's propensity. Though the plants are gone, completely uprooted, no anymore at the garden, but still, we will smell the garlic or onion surrounding. And that is the analogy used, here some of the Buddhist teachers. Not just fully free from those manifested in the sense active, the three poisons, but even from their propensities, from their seeds. So that is here, the term Buddha nature is, overall, what it says, all living beings, all living creatures have the seed, have the propensity to become fully awakened beings. So that is here. So then, what is that seed? What is that potential? How it looks like? Does it have shapes, colors, and so on and so forth? And that's what here some of the, these teachings refers to. Fundamental nature of the mind is the Buddha nature. And so far we discussed, I explained that you don't have that much choice. When we discussed, I said, the fundamental nature of the mind is luminosity, luminously clear. Is that Buddha nature? If the fundamental nature of the mind is Buddha nature, then so far our discussion about the fundamental nature of the mind is, as its nature, it is luminous, luminously clear, or luminosity, as its function, knowing. Do you remember? Those are the two factors that you need to go with you after you finish this course, at least. Okay, you say, such and such time at this beautiful place called Root Institute, in front of this funny Tibetan guy, are set 7 days to learn nature of the mind. Then if somebody asks, tell us what he told, what he said, the nature of the mind. You have to have those two. Very simple, very short. Nature of the mind is concerned, luminosity. As its function is concerned, knowing. Those two must be with you. So that is here. But there are other interpretations, explanations. What is that Buddha nature? And Sanjay, many of the commentators on this topic, they use the same terminology. The Buddha nature is the fundamental nature of our mind, particularly the subtlest mind. The mind is, in terms of the gross and subtle, it is explained in many different layers. Some are very, very subtle. It occurs only when all these gross consciousnesses, cognitive functions cease. Only that moment. We are able to experience. As long as these, the very gross levels of consciousnesses are in their function, we ordinary people like us, unable to experience that the subtlest consciousness that exists, that we all have, that we all have, which I briefly touched on the first day. So there are, it is said, particularly in the Buddhist Vajrayana teachings, it is said there are two ways. There are two ways to experience that the subtlest cognition or the nature of the mind. The first one is what they in these teachings, Vajrayana teachings, and they said we will experience that at the time of the death. At the time of the death. According to the close observation, close analysis, when death occurs, particularly naturally, not accidentally, suddenly, but when death occurs naturally, there are many different stages that we go through, physically and particularly mentally. Sometimes stages are counted as 8 stages. And these stages are explained according to what the technical term is used, dissolution of the sense consciousnesses, dissolution of the certain conceptual consciousnesses, and so on and so forth. Dissolution in the sense our sense consciousnesses stop their functions. And when sense consciousnesses stop their functions, and that the term is used, dissolution. And within the sense consciousnesses, there are different stages. So I'm not going to go all detail. In the mental consciousness, there are again different layers of mental consciousnesses. Like, for example, certain mental consciousnesses are very gross. What we remember in the past, what we have done, or what we wish for the future. Those are the very gross mental consciousness. They can stop relatively earlier as they function. But certain mental consciousnesses, they may last, even all the sense consciousnesses stop their function, but certain mental consciousnesses may last longer to stop their function. Now this subtlest mental consciousness, in Tibetan, there are different terminologies I use, but here the terminology that I'm familiar with is Chisim Tamo. Chisim Tamo. Chi Sen means the Chiwa, that means death. Sen is the mind. The subtlest mind of the time of the death. In the time of the death. One of the subtlest, Chisim Tamo. That mind, become very obvious, or more in a function when all the other consciousnesses, cognitions, sense consciousnesses, when they stop their function, and that will occur. When that occurs, or when that come into very vivid and very obvious, then the next stage is death. Death. So the subtlest mind will, become very obvious or very active at the time of the death. That's naturally occurring. I'm using the term occurring. Should not think that subtlest mind is not there while we are awake. It's there, but become very active, or the obvious is only that time. That's the one occasion. So in the Vajrayana practice, there are practices while we are alive, going through the different stages of the meditation, then try to activate or try to experience that subtlest mind, naturally, which become very active at the time of the death, when all the gross consciousnesses stop their function. So it seems I'm very happy to talk about death. So our tea time is already there. So shall we stop for tea? It's now 35, so we'll come back 5 minutes later than usual. Okay? want to remind you the purpose of this mantra recitation is simply to learn in our daily lives, to have a 5, 6, 7 minutes, really to, whatever you call it, resting, meditation, whatever term that you use, it doesn't matter. It is good to really to have that kind of quiet, time for yourselves to focus on the present, right here and now, without any, those different thoughts, emotions, wishes, fear, concern, without all those things. Just simply to sit to the present. For that purpose, as the other day I mentioned you, this recitation is for that purpose, and it is useful to do that in a regular basis. I'm saying in a regular basis, people who can't do it in a regular basis, don't feel guilty, okay? Guilty feeling is not helpful. But whenever you can, it is useful to do, and to calm down, to relax, to raise awareness, the basic, the mind to have that kind of mental qualities, which is very, very helpful in this very busy, demanding, outgoing lifestyle that we have. And of course, some days difficult for some other reasons, but it is good. It is good to give to yourselves, no matter how others things are important. Give to yourself for 6, 7 minutes a day to find a place to sit and to raise awareness. So that is the purpose of this meditation, So just before our short tea break, I was talking about this topic on the Buddha nature, and how the Buddha nature is explained by the different great teachers, and I briefly mentioned the sources. And when it comes to explain Buddha nature, all these different great teachers, they all tend to go down to this, the subtlest mind, the subtlest cognition, subtlest awareness that we all living beings share, or share in the sense have. And that subtlest cognition, that mind, cognition, awareness is experienced through the nature, that is at the time of the death, when all the gross cognitions, consciousnesses are stop their function or dissolve, and then when the bare, that subtlest mind remain, there's an opportunity to experience. And for ordinary people like me, at that time it is very, very difficult to experience that subtlest mind at that stage, at the time of the death. Then another occasion is through the meditation. And here, the initial meditation is done, what the technically called, the mimicking the death processes, mimicking the death processes. So in the meditation manual, where they explains, when death occurs in different stages, particularly the inner experiences. And so mimicking these different stages with the concentration, single-pointed mind, mimicking those different stages, and eventually, once again in the early stage, mimicking your meditation stage, rich at that last, the subtlest stage of the cognition or the awareness. Then, realizing it, realizing, experiencing it. But in the early stage, it is called, in a form of imitating or mimicking. But when the meditation is gone more advanced in terms of the concentration, in terms of the understanding, then it is said, that at the meditation, the individuals, the practitioners can experience exactly the same, that subtlest cognition which is naturally to occur at the time of the death. So this is we're talking about, through the meditation. Then a reverse back. So that is here, it is mentioned in these, particularly those advanced Buddhist, the Vajrayana teachings. So one's practitioner, through the meditation, realizes this subtlest cognition, the awareness. That realization is called, is called experiencing or realizing the subtlest nature of the mind. Here, I'm not going to use the term luminosity that we've used earlier, nature of the mind. Here, I'll just leave it to use the term the subtlest, the mind, through the meditation. So similar to that, do you remember the meditation that I mentioned the other day? Meditation on compassion, love and compassion is different from the meditation on impermanence, emptiness. In terms of the meditation on love and compassion, that mind which is meditating on love and compassion, itself tuned into love and compassion. Exactly the same in here. There's no subject, or there's no object there as a subtlest mind. There's no subject as here, the mind which is meditating. That subtlest, your mind which is meditating itself tuned into the subtlest mind. And it is said that states of mind, when when that state of mind, I'm adding another qualification, when that state of mind realizes in a two things, realizes that the fundamental nature of the mind, which is sometimes term is used, clear light, the other, the luminous, whatever term that you use. Different traditions use slightly different. So I will use, in this case, luminosity. Another experience is, as we briefly touched yesterday, emptiness. Emptiness in the sense that subtlest mind, which now one with the mind which is meditating, that subtlest mind, and in the form of the experiential aspect, experiencing luminosity, and as a it's another nature. Another nature is emptiness, in the sense that subtlest mind itself is also absence or empty or inherent or intrinsic entity. Inherent nature or intrinsic nature, whatever the term that you use. And that the second one, the subtlest mind, which realizes its nature is intrinsic, absence of intrinsic, absence of inherent nature. That nature is, many of the teachers pointed, that nature is Buddha nature. That nature is shared or possessed or have all living beings, all sentient beings have that nature. Or even certain teachers, the traditions points to the other side, more in the experiential level, that is that the subtlest mind experiencing its luminosity aspect, counting that as a Buddha nature. Those are the two, many great teachers have, explained. For me, one is pointing the finger as a Buddha nature from the experience aspect of the subtlest mind. One group of master is pointing the finger, Buddha nature, as its nature, that is empty or absence of inherent existence. Subtlest mind, empty or absence of inherent existence. But if we bring these two, what in English there's a particular term, boils down, it reaches at the same point. Looking from the slightly different angle, otherwise it will take you to the same point. That when I was leading classes in this particular topic, two truths, conventional truth and the ultimate truth. And I gave, somehow when I was leading in the earlier in the sense, maybe early 2000, when there's a particular study program that they put together when I was working in Jhana Buddhist Meditation Center. It is called the Fun. I'm not selling my course, okay? Don't think that it's not working now. The course is called Foundation of Buddhist Thoughts and it has 6 modules and 6 books, 6 topics. The second topic, which is called the Two Truths, conventional truth and alternate truth. And while I was putting these materials together, and one occasion I was teaching what's the difference between the two truths. And one of my analogies, that time someone given to me or left it on my front table in a bowl, chocolate with a coin shape, covered with the gold, I don't know what you call it, the paper, foil, yeah. But outside it looks very, very nice, so round like this. So my analogy was that time, if you lick that chocolate from either A side or the B side, you will reach to the other side. Doesn't matter from which side that you lick, you will reach on the other side. And so that is my analogy, and it is same in here. When really seriously your meditation reach at that level, in which aspect of the subtlest mind that you point your finger as a Buddha nature, two sides of the same golden chocolate will take you to the right point. Not that much difference. That's the one thing that we need to. Then, if all of us have a Buddha nature, all living creatures, then while we are in this circle, constantly struggling, why we are this state of what in Buddhist term is called unenlightened state, or another jargon quite often is used, samsaric state. Why? If we all have a Buddha nature, why we struggle? Why Buddha nature is not coming to help us? And there are slightly different interpretations, but the overall is same. Methodology or explanation might be slightly different. Overall is, yes, we all have the Buddha nature, but our Buddha nature is stained or covered by those afflictions that we talked about last 6 days. Particularly those afflictions that we listed yesterday: hatred, attachment, negative pride, and self-grasping, ignorance. All of those 3 poisons, if you take it, the negative pride, last list in the 3. So these are very much active in our lives. So no matter how deep-rooted, no matter how well-established or that Buddha nature that we have, there's no, the surface by these afflictions we are in this struggle. That is the common understanding in these different slightly. Now the different interpretation is this. Some teachers, some traditions interpret not a Buddha nature as a seed. Each one of us, fully fledged, fully fledged Buddha is within us. Every living being, the Buddha is fully fledged within us. But some others say, no, that's not the case. We have the seed or the potential to become fully awakened, but not fully fledged Buddha. That's a slightly different interpretations. But for me, work is same. Whether there is a fully fledged Buddha within us, or it is in a form of seed, what we need to do is the same. Need to remove all those delusions, afflictions that we talked about. So those are the things quite useful to. I just pointed out a few points, important points, in relation to this topic, the nature. What I did in here, interpreted when I'm explaining, and also some of the texts are. But Buddha nature can be explained purely, not conflate, not merging what you call the Vajrayana teachings. Here, my interpretation so far, I explain in a little bit, bring the teachings and the meditations explained or done in the Vajrayana teachings. Then I try to incorporate two together. But the teachings on the Buddha nature, what is Buddha nature, how the features of the Buddha nature, and so on and so forth, can be explained without Vajrayana elements. But if you put in the Vajrayana elements, the interpretation, explanation will be quite complete, fuller. So that is what here. And this text, which I didn't manage to say in Sanskrit, but in English, sublime continuum, Gyulama in Tibetan. Buddha nature is, demonstrated or explained in 10 different examples. 10 different examples. One which I already touched earlier, saying a very poor family living in a very poor living conditions, not realizing under their house there is a huge lump of gold. Once they realize there is full a lump of gold under there, and sell it, that will relieve their poverty nature. And that's one of the analogies. Another analogy is used saying, like a space which we saw the other day. Space by its nature is clean in the sense the clouds are not penetrated. Once clouds are clear, you'll perceive the pure, what you call the sky. There's another. What's there? There's 10 examples. Some are better than what I've shared. These two, nicer in the sense. Now the one example is having a lump of gold, then gradually turning into beautiful jewelries. Although the material is concerned, it's the same gold. But working through by the very skilled, what we call the craftsmen or people, turn into very beautiful, very ornate, what you call the jewelries. That's another example. We all have the seeds, Buddha nature, like a lump of gold, but then once we work with it as, on the one hand, enhancing, nurturing all those like love, compassion, altruism, and the wisdom. On the other hand, minimizing, reducing all those afflictions. And that is like the craftsman working with the lump of jewel and making very beautiful ornaments. That's that analogies. There are several 10, normally there are 10 lists. There are also some others, but anyway, what it will give you, what this teaching will give us. This teaching, when we discuss this topic, it will give us a sense of, first of all, a sense of value in our existence, particularly people who follow the teachings of the Buddha. And second thing is it will give us, something to work with it. This life is not just this, all the time, what you call the not enough, and all those things, but there is a meaning. Another very mind training, when we train our mind, lojong, this teaching will give us to have a respect towards all living beings, because they all share. In that case, very similar to Abrahamic religious tradition. Say, all living beings, all human beings have the God's entity. Entity or whatever term they use. In that sense, have a respect towards all human beings. So there are these things, very, very, the profound teachings. But, sometimes it may give us false hope. Saying, I will put the nature. It will sort it out my future. Or it will take care of my future, me to become fully awakened. That's not the case. Yes, seed is there, but need to work. Unfortunately. So that's here have some connection with our main topic, what you call the nature of the mind. Okay. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to briefly create a nightmare in your mind. I'm going to recap some of the topics that we have discussed. So the first thing I want to say is, whether we have a belief or not, whether we have a spiritual path to follow or not, whether we are, Buddhist or not. At the first day, I asked you, what is the purpose of learning the nature of the mind. And I hope you all remember that. We worked with that recently, and this is something important. That is taming the mind. The term that we use, taming the mind. And that is right at the beginning in our text that we printed. Taming the mind is excellent. A tamed mind leads to bliss. Bliss is not my favorable term, but that's how they translate it. So, think about it. Really to taming in the sense, gently, with skillfully, reducing, minimizing some of those, unhelpful mental states. And through that unhelpful behavior is something, to think about and to work with, whether we have a spiritual path or not. This will benefit to ourselves. This will benefit to our families, the families that you live with. And if you have cats and dogs, they will more, I know people who have cats and dogs, they really care very much. Even they have a beautiful clothing. The bow ties. Just unbelievable. Having dogs have a bow ties. So they will enjoy more. So therefore, our own life will be more, comfortable or relaxed. Even in the surface, there are some challenges, there are difficulties, but those difficulties, those challenges will not make impact to the more depth of our cognition. Like an analogy is used very often. In the ocean's surface might be very turbulent by the heavy winds or whatever, but in the depth, not that much movement. Only if you have a very, very, very heavy whatever, you will see a little bit movement, otherwise deep down, stay very, calm. Similar to that, if we work with our minds, tame our minds, to reduce some of those, unhelpful mental states, I will not name, but you all know now from your own experiences what are the unhealthy mental states. So that's the first thing I would like to remind all of us, not just you, to myself too. We're all in the same sort of journey. And in terms of our main topic, which I already briefly touched on in the previous session, what is the nature of the mind? And the luminosity as its nature, and what is the function of the mind? Knowing, cognizing. That's what we already discussed, and which is useful to think about. Then we touched on, that when we are, learning, studying, particularly coming from these Indian masters, Abhidhamma texts, and some of those texts, the mind consciousness is not just one thing. It has many kinds, many types, and in that context we talked about sense consciousnesses and the mental consciousness. I didn't go into detail how sense consciousnesses arise, and I didn't go into detail what are the main, the causes, but what I said, and we spent relatively good time to say again and again, the power of the sense consciousnesses is very dominating in our lives. That needs to think about. And in certain extreme cases, we are very much slaved to fulfill the sense consciousnesses. They demand. And that is really something important to think about. Here it's not saying don't enjoy nice shapes and colors, don't enjoy nice music, it's not saying don't enjoy smells and tastes and tactiles, but to have oneself should be the master, not the sense consciousnesses. The other day are quote very directly from the Buddhist point of view, what is the purpose of meditation? You remember? Very short.
To familiarize.
Okay, to familiarize, yeah, that's fine.
Training the mind.
Sorry?
Training the mind.
Training the mind, that's also right. Correct. But I'm looking at a very specific one. I said,
It's to observe the function.
well, that's also fine. But I said another one. Sorry?
To realize the Buddha.
Okay, that's also. Yeah, okay, good. I said, so far, ourselves are under the power of our minds. Do you remember that? Our minds are under the power of what? Affliction. That is important one. That state, I've explained steps. So purpose of the meditation is reversing that. Our minds, freeing from the affliction, and ourselves be the master, not our mind. In Tibetan, I recorded here, in Tibetan, Rang Sem Ge Wang Tu Song, Sem Nyemo Ge Wang Tu Song. So oneself is very much, in this case, under the power of sense consciousnesses, and sense consciousnesses are very much distracted under the power of sense objects. So that is important one. When we talk about a variety of consciousnesses. Then we start with the meditation, and also briefly revise all the touch yesterday afternoon, several different kinds of meditation, and it depends on for which purpose that we are doing meditation. Some meditation, simply that mind which is meditating need to realize what is the object of the meditation. Some meditation, the meditator mind itself tune into the object of the meditation, in this case, love and compassion. Also, the four foundation of mindfulness. Mindfulness of the body, mindfulness of the feeling or sensation, mindfulness of the mind, mindfulness of the phenomena. These are very popular, very well known, but from the Buddhist point of view, more then there are very specific, reasons to deal with. Then we move to talk about, within the cognitions, within the consciousness, some are conceptual and some are non-conceptual. And how they approach to the relevant object is different. Non-conceptuals are direct, without any mediation, and conceptual consciousnesses always to cognize their object, mediation of image of the object itself. When we think a delicious cake right now, we have an image of cake. And reaching to that object is through that image. And all the time, conceptual minds are mistaken. No matter how accurate they are with regard to the engaged object, but they are always mistaken with regard to the appearing objects. So we have touched briefly on these two different kinds of objects, but that's how useful to remember. Also, I share with you conceptual thoughts are mistaken, but conceptual thoughts and language are the only medium, only means that we have to understand some of those hidden phenomena, hidden things and events, hidden in the sense not hidden by some other people, but by nature. Do you remember? There are three kinds. What are those three kinds? Obvious? Tick. That's very good. Obvious, hidden, and very hidden. We haven't hardly touched what is the approach, what is the means to understand the very hidden. I just said very briefly once, but I didn't say that much. But we talk about obvious object and also hidden object. And within the hidden object, some of the most important in the sense to raise our understanding, knowledge, wisdom, like the nature of impermanence, like the nature of emptiness, like the nature of dukkha, from the Buddhist point of view. To understand that those things, then for us, what we have as a tools, language and the conceptual mind. Through the conceptual mind, we form means to understand some of those hidden. So that is important one. Then we talk about, how can we form, how can we structure some of those hidden things to understand. Then I briefly talk about Buddhist logic. The ancient Indian masters, not necessarily only Buddhist, ancient Indian masters, they use the logic to understand some of those hidden things. And that is something, useful. And I briefly talk to you the basic, or what's called the basic structure of how the logic is structured in Buddhism, in this they call epistemological or the Buddhist logic. Very, very important to explore Not easy, but people who have education in the modern logic and they have a little bit understanding of the classical Western logic, you will understand relatively easily. Though modern logic, I was told, is very much mathematical based, but classical Western logic has a somewhat very similar element of the structure, like a subject, thesis, predicate, and so forth, example, and so forth. It's useful to explore. Conceptual, non-conceptual. Then, particularly people who are Buddhist, it is nice to understand the Buddha, the historical Buddha. I'm pointing finger to that metal statue. That is a statue, but this guy who came on this planet. We can say many beautiful things. He was born in this very the kingdom or whatever. But if we read some, let alone the Mahayana sutras, but even those common sutras, they are very, very, amazing teachings. So, and in that case, I quote a phrase, a verse, which is in a text, short text, composed by this great teacher, Tsongkhapa, saying, that you are great teacher, because you taught all your teachings are one way or another to understand dependent arising nature. This you need to think about. Why understanding of dependent arising nature helps? Very, very profound meanings there. And at the same time, this great teacher has said, all those teachings that you have given are on the subject of one way or another on the nature of dependent arising, but that itself is given the living beings to experience peace from suffering and origins of suffering. And in that case, it is good for, particularly in this case, people who are following the teachings of the Buddha. Sometimes when we say, recall the Buddha, very often, we have this image of either drawing or statue, or in the main temple inside there's a statue, or individuals that you have in your own home have a nice painting or statue. That is useful, but to really cultivate deep sense of admiration, inspiration, then it is good to understand his qualities, inner qualities. That will inspire, that will feel very, admired to Buddha. So that is one thing which I'll share with you. Then one session we talked about, the mistaken cognition and unmistaken cognition. These are also useful for us. Many of us, when we perceive things, sensory or mentally when we think, many of us, we don't think second thought. We don't have second thought. What I've seen, what I think is right, correct. But in reality, there are many mistaken elements. As long as we work with the mistaken, follow the mistaken elements of the mind, there is consequences. And when I say consequences, I'm not talking about next life in hell. I'm talking about right here and now. So that is really useful to think about. Just simply to remind ourselves what I see, what I hear, what I think, what I plan, what I wish, what I hope, not necessarily all the time right, correct. In those there are mistakes. Even when we are saying, I'm seriously searching spiritual path. Even when we think I am in this right spiritual path, there are mistaken elements. So important to remember that. Then we touched briefly 4 rationalities. Rationality of nature, rationality of function, rationality of dependence, and rationality of the proofs. So those are the 4 rationalities we briefly touched. They all have directly or indirectly connection to our lives when we interact with the things and events. All those things and events, including after the session that we are going to eat our delicious lunch, have all those rationalities that have its nature. So think about those. Then last, Saturday, and also, last Saturday, we talked a little bit about the afflictions. And whether, importance to know, to keep in mind, whether we experience, whether we, in our mental continuum, whether there is whether affliction occurs or not, we don't need to go to do the observation from a realized being. Do you understand what I'm making? It seems you haven't got the joke. So I'm making a small joke here, but you have no response. The joke is this, it is not just Tibetan, unique Tibetan culture. It seems all over the world have the same culture, slightly different. The things that you want to make a big decision, but you are not sure how to make that decision, then you go to see, in Tibetan culture, you go to see a Lama, not that animal, but a realized being, and ask him, mainly him, I have this decision to make. Can you do an observation? Then Lama will say, okay, I'll do that. Find 3 dices, you say? Throw it. One number comes, then he will tell you, okay, make decision, whatever he comes. That's an observation in Tibetan monk. And there are in Chinese tradition that the sticks, itching. In African tradition, going to see some of the African tradition, going to see oracles, and there are different layers of oracles. And when the final highest oracle says that is the fact, then you have to accept it. So, but here, whether in our mental continuum, whether affliction, or if I use the plural, afflictions are occurring or not, we don't need to go to see the observation. That's what I'm saying. That's my job. It is, we can tell from our experiences. And then yesterday I briefly explained, what is affliction. Those are the important things, and today we briefly touch on the Buddha nature. So that is my revision. Oh yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for your attention, coming and paying attention, and very attentive. And there's no any disasters, I hope. Because when you are leading a group, particularly in a very strict retreat, like the talk, very silent, and no dinner, then lots of emotions arise, then sometimes there are disasters. Unfortunately, I'm not staying here, so I don't hear that. When you go to a particular place for retreat, then you are also staying in the same place. What's going on? So anyway, I enjoy it very much, and also your participant, and carry on. That is how it is. And we will say the 21 Tara prayers, and we all, dedicate our gatherings, our activities, to sharing the teachings from those Buddha and those great teachers that taught me, and I share with you, and all those virtues, activities will dedicate for the well-beings of all living beings, and also particularly, at the moment of last few years, our current world is going through very turbulent times. So to have a more peace, less, the man-made disasters like war, famine, and also natural disasters through the earthquake or flooding and so forth, not have those or less. So we'll dedicate, and those great teachers, regardless of which nationality, which the religious traditions, all those great teachers, I'm using the term teachers, those beings who at least try to make this world more peaceful, more harmony. Those teachers, those beings to have a long life, and all their activities be very fruitful. And so we'll dedicate our virtues in that way while we are reciting the 20th Dana prayers. Om Je Je Ma Pa Ma La Cha Se Mo Cha Se Do Ma Nyu Ma Pa Mo Che Ne Ge Ji Lo Da Ta Ma Ji Ge Sun Ge Che Ge She Ji Ke Sa Che Wa Le Mi Jo Ma Cha Se Do Ge Da Wa Gu Du Ka Wa De Ne Si Be She Ma Kama Tonda Soba Nam Ji Radu Cheve Rapa Chanze Seme Chone Jeti Peme Chame Nabara Dema Jeba Suju Kato Shiva Sarva Sante Chu Nema Changze de shin shebe su do, taye nambara jawa chema, malu paru chimpa to, jawe sendi shindu tema, changze du da rahu ye, de da choda nanga kama, jigde dumbo shakti nende, leba meba guba nema, changze jaje mela tsang, long la na so wan ju che ma, chong bo ro na che sa nam da, ni jun so di du ne de ma, chang se je je cha dang pe ge, pa ro chu bo ram du che ma, ye go yen jang sha di ne de, me ba chu ba shin du pa, chang se du re je pa che bo, di di pa wo na pa cho, Chöge shane choni tenze, chao tamje ma lu su, chanse gunsho sumse chage, seme tuka nambara gema, ma lu chogi kolo gembe, randi wege soma tuwa, chanse rakdu kawa chebe, oje wege chenwa pelma, sheba rakhe tutara, de dan je gen wan do ze ma, cha ze sa shi kyung we so na, tam je gu pa ni ma ni ma, cho nie ye wa yi ge hong ni, pong ba tam je na ba zhe ma, cha ze da we do bu hu ni, jian ba tam je xin do pa ra, le be chen me e ba me le, da wa xin do we re ze, Changze kebe tama neta, barbe chingwe wune nema, ye kya yungu kune kobe, taye kune nambara choma, changze sashi mala chage, teki lunchin shakti doma, choni chenze yeke hongi, reba dumbo namni kema, Changze tema kema shema, nyangen deshin shu nema, sowa omdang yang da nema, dipa chenpo chongpa nema, changze kune korwa kawe, taye lune nambara kema, yige chubu mani kwe, dipa hule choma nema, changze turi shane Hoge nambe sabe nima, re ra me da ra dan bi che, chikden sumna yowa nima, changze vai soi nambe, re da ta che chana nam, tara ni ju pe ki ye, de na ma lu pa ne selema, changze vai soman ke ko, ha da niam che den, Kune koja kawa chigi, zeta me lama ngenpa sema, changze nima tawa gebe, chinye pola ero sema, hara niju tudarai, shindo taku rinne sema, changze tenye sunam kwebe, shive tudayang da tema, dendang lam nijun so, Chompa turi raksho nima, sare ma di te wa di tam, chakse wa ni ni shu sa. Oh yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much.
I've been asked by our program coordinator to offer our thanks on behalf of the center. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Maybe okay. So I think I first